So, what really makes a fictional character feel real?
Right. Yeah, it's a huge question.
I mean, when you find yourself, just deeply attached to basically a grouping of linguistic marks on a page, what is the exact mechanism that's tricking your brain into believing they have a soul?
It is a super compelling question.
Hmm.
And historically, humanity's answer to that was actually pretty flat. For centuries, we really didn't have a concept of characters possessing a rich, autonomous internal life.
Which is exactly why, for this deep dive, we're opening up this really brilliant collection of essays, specifically an introduction by the legendary literary critic Harold Bloom.
Yes, a classic.
And we are focusing on one of literature's most notorious, terrifying figures, which is Shakespeare's Iago from the play Othello.
Oh, absolutely terrifying.
Right. But our mission here isn't just to do, like, a basic character study of a famous villain. We're using Bloom's insights to explore how Shakespeare quite literally invented the modern concept of human personality.
Yeah, using Iago as his darkest masterpiece of psychology.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this by starting at the absolute foundation. Bloom argues we have to look at the dictionary definition of the word character itself, because it represents a collision of two very different ideas.
Yeah, so if you trace it back, the ancient Greek word character, it basically meant a graphic symbol.
Like a physical mark.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a physical sharp mark left by a stylus, literally an etching on a surface. But then over time, our modern word character absorbed another Greek concept entirely, which is othos.
Ah,
And othos translates to a habitual way of life. So, your personality,
right.
your internal moral compass.
So you have this tension between just a physical mark on a page and a living, breathing personality. And that tension, well, it sparks a massive debate in literary circles.
Oh, it really does. I mean, on one end of the spectrum, you have someone like the 18th century critic, Dr. Samuel Johnson. He argued that characters are simply an imitation of real humans.
Okay, so the author observes the world and just copies it onto the page, which, that makes intuitive sense to most of us. We read a book and we think, oh, I know someone just like that.
Right, but then you jump to the 20th century with Roland Barthes, who takes the complete opposite stance. Barthes argues that characters are literally just groupings of linguistic marks.
Wait, really?
Yeah, he says they exist only as syntax, just a term of discourse.
Wait, so Barthes is saying if I'm, crying over a character dying in a novel, I'm literally just crying over a specific arrangement of commas and vowels, because that feels incredibly cynical.
It is deeply cynical, yeah. But, I mean, from a purely structural standpoint, he isn't wrong. They're just words.
Right, I guess.
However, Bloom points out that this distinction completely collapses when we deal with Shakespeare.
Okay, how so?
Well, Shakespeare's words achieve such absolute authority that they become a kind of factual reality. Our sense of what a fictional person is, it heavily dictates our ideas of what a real person is in our actual lives.
Oh, wow. So if we want to understand a master manipulator like Iago, we first have to figure out how Shakespeare built this entirely new type of human mind. We have to
Okay.
move from the definition of a character to the mechanics of one. Like, how did he actually build the engine?
Right. And Bloom makes a massive, earth-shattering claim here. He says that before Shakespeare, characters in literature didn't really develop from the inside out.
What do you mean?
Well, look at the Bible or Homer's epics.
Hmm.
Characters like Jacob or Achilles, they certainly aged, they suffered, they reacted to wars and plagues, sure.
Yeah, plenty of suffering.
Right, but their habitual modes, their othos, it didn't fundamentally change based on internal self-reflection.
Let me see if I follow that. So Achilles gets angry, his pride is wounded, and he sits in his tent refusing to fight.
Yes.
But he doesn't sit in his tent and think, why am I so angry? Is it because of my complicated relationship with my mortality? He just, stews in the emotion.
That is the crucial distinction, yes. It's not that humans in the real world didn't reflect. It's that literature hadn't yet captured that internal, real-time mutation as the core driver of personality.
Okay.
Shakespeare invented characters who changed specifically by overhearing themselves.
Oh, I love that phrase. Overhearing themselves. It's like, well, imagine you're furious at a colleague. You draft this incredibly angry, blistering email.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. But before you hit send, you read it back.
Mm-hmm.
And in the process of reading your own words, you realize, wow, I am not actually mad at them. I'm just deeply insecure about my own performance on this project.
Exactly.
By reading your own words, you literally alter your state of mind in real time.
That analogy captures the exact mechanism Bloom is talking about. You externalize your thought, you overhear it, and that feedback loop changes your internal reality.
That's fascinating.
And Bloom notes that there were a few preludes to this in literature, like Geoffrey Chaucer's partner in the Canterbury Tales starts to do this. He gets kind of carried away by overhewing his own tale-telling. But Shakespeare perfected it as like a psychological operating system.
So when Hamlet or Iago are giving these famous soliloquies, it's not just a narrator explaining their evil plan to the audience.
No, not at all.
It's a monologue to themselves, and we just happen to be in the room watching them figure it out.
Exactly. They aren't reciting a fixed state of mind. They are actively pondering what they just said. They mutate in real time. They suffer change by their own relation to their language.
So what does this all mean? If Shakespeare really gave characters this internal feedback loop, then he's doing a lot more than writing good dialogue. He's basically laying the foundation for how we analyze human behavior today.
He really is. Bloom actually connects this to Oscar Wilde's famous essay, The Decay of Lying, where Wilde argues that life imitates art far more than art imitates life.
Right, I've heard that.
Wilde said that without Shakespeare, we would perish for lack of images. Shakespeare didn't imitate human nature as it was understood in the 1500s. He actually expanded it by giving us the vocabulary to understand ourselves.
Wait, so are we saying Shakespeare is a better psychologist than actual psychologists?
Yeah.
Because claiming he invented modern psychology before Freud is a massive leap.
It is a bold claim, yeah.
I mean, Freud had clinical data. He had patients he studied for years. Shakespeare was writing stage plays to sell tickets at the Globe Theater. How does Bloom justify putting them on the same level?
Well, Bloom isn't saying Shakespeare ran clinical trials right. He's taking the stance that a Shakespearean reading of Freud is actually much more illuminating than a Freudian reading of Shakespeare.
Okay, unpack that for me.
So Freud gave us terms like the ego, the id, the subconscious, and repression. But Bloom argues that Shakespeare mapped those exact dynamics centuries earlier. Freud just provided a clinical translation of what Hamlet or Iago had already demonstrated.
So Freud's id and ego are just like academic labels for the internal arguments Shakespeare's characters were already having with themselves.
In many ways, yes. Shakespeare's villains, especially Iago, possess such a labyrinthine comprehension of their own will.
Labyrinthing. I like that.
Yeah, they analyze themselves so deeply that they essentially act as their own psychoanalysts.
So Iago's basically charging himself $200 an hour just to ruin his own life.
Pretty much. And everyone else's lives in the process. Which actually brings us to the core of Iago's character.
Right, because if Shakespeare mapped out the human psyche, Iago is his exploration of its darkest, most terrifying terrain.
Absolutely. We've talked about the creation of personality, so now we need to look at the ultimate destruction of it.
Okay, let's dive into that. Because the traditional critical view of Iago from critics like, C.L. Barber or Richard P. Wheeler usually boxes him into pretty simple motives.
Very simple, yeah.
They say he's just jealous of Othello's position, or they lean heavily into those Freudian interpretations, arguing he has repressed sexual desires for Othello.
Yeah, and Bloom completely dismantles those traditional views.
Yeah.
He says we have to look way past those superficial motives.
So what is the real motive?
Bloom's central thesis on Iago is much more profound. He argues that Iago's religion is war, and Othello is his god of war.
Oh, wow. So it's not just a disgruntled employee mad at his boss. It's a worshiper and a deity.
Exactly. Iago worships the purity of combat, the absolute brutal authority of the battlefield. And Othello is the physical embodiment of that perfection. Right. He's the ultimate captain.
Right.
But then Othello does something unforgivable in Iago's eyes. He promotes Cassio.
Right, Cassio, a man who knows all the theoretical book learning of war, but has no practical experience. He's never bled in the mud the way Iago has for Othello.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting, because if you put this in a modern context, you can almost feel the sting.
Oh, for sure. Imagine you are the fiercely loyal right-hand man to a brilliant startup founder. You have bled for this company, worked 80-hour weeks for years, slept under your desk. You believe in this founder like a god.
Yeah.
And then, out of nowhere, the founder brings in this smooth-talking, fresh out of business school intern and immediately makes him vice president over you.
Exactly. The betrayal isn't just a career setback. It destroys your entire belief system. The meritocracy you believed in is a complete lie. The god you worshipped is completely fallible.
That is devastating.
It is. That is the exact ontological shock Iago experiences. He becomes, in Bloom's phrasing, the furious priest or worshiper who has been found unworthy.
Wow.
Or rather, he sees that someone completely unworthy has been chosen over him. Bloom actually compares Iago to Melville's Captain Ahab and Othello to Moby Dick.
Okay, hold on. You're losing me slightly with the Ahab comparison. Are we saying Iago literally thinks Othello is a giant monster, or is this a metaphor for how they view the universe?
It's a spiritual metaphor. For Ahab, the white whale isn't just an animal. It represents a Gnostic cosmic principle.
Meaning what, exactly?
The idea that the universe is governed by an alien, uncaring, or fundamentally flawed deity that just must be destroyed. For Iago, Othello ceases to be a human general. He becomes an idol that has betrayed its own religion.
So if Iago's entire universe has been shattered by this betrayal, how does he strike back? Because you can't just stab a god with a physical sword. That's too easy. You have to destroy them psychologically.
Yes, exactly. Iago engages in what Bloom calls a negative theology. He doesn't just want a promotion anymore. He wants to drag his god down from the pedestal into the primal abyss. He wants to make Othello uncreate himself.
Uncreate himself? That is chilling.
It really is.
And the way he does it is by becoming a playwright. But a dark playwright. He doesn't write with a quill and parchment. He writes with people.
Right. Iago manipulates his equals, his superiors, his underlings. Everyone around him becomes a character in a script that only he knows he is writing. He uses their own desires and insecurities against them.
How does that actually work in practice, though? Like, how does he rewrite someone's reality without them knowing?
He uses that exact overhearing mechanism we discussed earlier, but as a weapon.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah, he drops a tiny linguistic virus into Othello's ear. For example, Iago doesn't immediately forge a letter proving Desdemona is cheating with Cassio.
Right.
Instead, when Cassio walks away from Desdemona, Iago just stands next to Othello and mutters, "Ha!" I like that.
Just planting a seed of doubt.
Exactly. And when Othello asks what he means, Iago plays innocent. He uses the word honest over and over again, leaving blanks for Othello's own insecurities to fill in.
Wow.
He forces Othello to overhear his own growing paranoia, letting the general destroy his own mind.
It's like he hacks into their psychological source code. And I know Bloom points out a terrifying reversal of scripture that acts as the foundation of Iago's whole script.
Oh, yes.
In the Bible, St. Paul declares, "By the grace of God, I am what I am." It is the ultimate statement of divine identity.
And Iago takes that exact phrase, twists it, and makes it his personal motto, "I am not what I am."
It's so unsettling.
It is a pledge to the void, a complete rejection of reality as it is given. By declaring that he is nothing, he frees himself to become anything, to become the shape-shifting architect of ruin.
And what's fascinating here is that he loves doing it. He isn't suffering through this revenge like, Hamlet suffers through his. Iago is having the time of his life.
He possesses a profound aesthetic pride. He is basically a dramatic critic admiring his own masterpiece.
I have to bring up a quote from the text here because it perfectly captures that arrogant joy.
Oh, go for it.
He's looking at Othello, who is just starting to unravel from the jealousy Iago has planted. And Iago says to himself, "Not poppy, nor mandragora, nor all the drowsy syrups of the world shall ever medicine thee with that sweet sleep which thou owest yesterday."
So good.
He's basically writing a 5-star review of his own poison.
He is. He's savoring every single syllable of the destruction. Bloom compares this self-consciousness to the aesthetic awareness of romantic poets like John Keats, but inverted into pure malice. By reducing a godlike general into a trembling, irrational mess, Iago proves to himself that Othello was never worthy of worship in the first place.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy orchestrated by an absolute genius.
But as we know, every genius has a blind spot.
Exactly. The architect of all this ruin accidentally engineers his own downfall. How does a mastermind who sees the fatal flaw in literally everyone else completely miss the very thing that destroys his entire plot?
Well, Iago's trap is mathematically perfect, except for one variable his cynical worldview just couldn't account for, which is his own wife, Emilia.
It's the ultimate irony. He's the psychological savant when it comes to the dark side of humanity, greed, lust, jealousy. But he's functionally illiterate when it comes to the light.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
Iago operates on the assumption that everyone is driven by self-interest. He assumes his wife will just stay quiet and obey him out of self-preservation,
Right.
as she always has.
Right.
His negative theology has absolutely no framework to process selfless love or genuine moral outrage.
So when Othello murders Desdemona and Emilia discovers the body, Iago just expects her to fall in line.
But Emilia is transformed by the horror of what has happened to her innocent mistress. She experiences an explosive, courageous outrage.
Right. She won't stay quiet.
She refuses to be silenced, even when Iago draws his sword on her. Her sudden burst of pure, uncalculated humanity shatters Iago's intricate clockwork bomb.
His cynicism was a superpower right up until it became his fatal limit. He trapped himself in his own web because he genuinely believed that virtue was just a mask people wore. When he was finally confronted with the real thing, he had no defense against it.
Exactly. He is defeated not by a superior intellect, but by empathy.
Okay, let's take a breath and recap the journey we just went on for everyone listening. We started with the ancient Greek definition of a character, just a simple stylus mark on a page. Then we discovered how Shakespeare revolutionized that concept, inventing the modern personality by allowing characters to overhear their own thoughts and mutate in real time.
Right, which then provided the blueprint for modern psychology, mapping out the internal conflicts of the human mind long before clinical terms were even invented.
And finally, we witnessed how Iago, suffering a profound spiritual betrayal, used that same psychological depth as a weapon of total war. He became a dark playwright, rewriting the reality of everyone around him, only to be undone by the one human emotion his cynical mind couldn't manipulate, which was courageous outrage.
Yeah, and if we bring this all back to you, the listener, there is a really profound takeaway hiding in Bloom's analysis. Think about how you shape your own character every single day.
Oh, this is a great point.
Every time you draft a long email and delete half of it, every time you record a voice note and listen back to it before hitting send, or just talk through a complex problem aloud, you are participating in that exact Shakespearean act.
You are overhearing yourself.
Yes, you're externalizing your thoughts, observing them, and modifying who you are in real time. Your character isn't a fixed, static thing etched in stone. It is constantly being written and rewritten by your own self-reflection.
Which leaves us with a pretty intense thought to chew on. If Shakespeare proved that genuine human growth requires us to actively overhear and challenge our own thoughts, what happens to our character today?
Right.
Because we live in a digital world that is largely designed to be an echo chamber, a world that feeds our own opinions right back to us, constantly validating us instead of challenging us. Are we still actively evolving through deep self-reflection? Or are we just reading a script someone else wrote for us? Until next time, think about who is really writing the script of your character